one of my aunts, she was disabled, and while the Burmese military came to the village, they couldn't, so she couldn't run, so she killed herself. I did not experience that myself, but I was born in the refugee camp, and hearing the story from people, from my parents, it just breaks my heart every time, and I can imagine for families who constantly experience this. And the civil war is still happening in Burma, and lots of Korean people are still fleeing, still hiding in the jungle. So I want to tell you a little bit about. So since March of this year, the Burmese military has broken a nationwide ceasefire agreement leading to a fight with the Korean soldiers. More than 3,000 Korean villagers were forced to flee their home. And sorry. So these villagers have fled Burmese army all their lives. So on April 5th, the Burmese soldier murdered the Korean indigenous leader So Omo. He's related to my mom, by the way. And leaving 7 young children without their father. So these children, they don't have any opportunity. So this spends most of their childhood running and hiding in the jungle. They don't know anything outside of what's in their village. So according to Korean Women Organization, over 200,000 Korean people are living as internally displaced person hiding in the jungle in fear of Burmese army, and nearly 1,000 are still in the refugee camp. I spent 14 years in the refugee camp, and there was no opportunity, not enough food, no healthcare system, no education system. So I'm very blessed to be here in Canada.
Man, how can it not hurt? We keep wondering this every day. And everyone is our people. Every one of us comes from each other. We can't just deny the rights, deny the safety, deny the security for one, and then give it to the other. That's not equality. And someone who's been teaching me about, security, about the safety, about the social justice so much is Annie. We know the mass rapes, the burning of villages, the hundreds of thousands, now into the millions of people being affected. And when is it okay to scream then? Is it not now? Was it not after the first person? Was it not 40, 50 years ago? Again, it's disgusting to think that we've become so pacified about all this and that we don't care enough. So I am a Sephardic Jew. So it's like Arabic Jew from, my family's from Morocco. And certainly, as Audrey spoke about the idea of kind of that intergenerational trauma, that definitely exists in my family and in my world. And the very real reality that as a teacher, when I open a textbook, and I don't necessarily use a textbook, but I'm just saying in the textbooks, you see things like the Holocaust. And usually it's one of the few. And it really makes me wonder sometimes when we say things like never again, what utter, and I'm sorry I'm a teacher, but I'm going to have to swear, what utter bullshit. Never again what? It happens, it keeps happening, it's happening again, encore, again. We see this happening. And here we are today, and now it's the Rohingya people's turn. We're not learning our lessons. We're not actually thinking about what's going on, about what has happened, about what makes humans commit genocide. Millions of Rohingya suffer, and we all know this, under the brutal and annihilating forces of genocide, and we simply go about our lives. Today, I call us out. We're all here, but I'm talking about the people in the buildings, the people that might hear this as they, drive by. We're hypocrites. We're unwilling to learn. We're unwilling to listen. We say the right things, we don't do the right things, as Audrey said, right? It's about doing, it's not just about saying.
This has not been a one-day event, a one-month event, a one-year-long situation, a sudden crisis. The steps of genocide, and that's really what I want to talk about today, have been happening for decades in Myanmar. The marginalization, dehumanization, displacement, and there's more steps, and final annihilation have had years to ferment in the minds and the hearts of people in Myanmar and the world, just so I'm clear on that. So let's be honest. Yeah, we mentioned names like Aung Suu Kyi and the generals and the UN and the ICC. Well, that's the sexy stuff that brings in the media. But the real reality here is you have everyday people in Myanmar committing the genocide. They're the foot soldiers that pick up the weapons, that commit the mass rapes, that are making people flee for their lives. That this dehumanization, we see it happening in America, in Canada, in Europe, as masses of refugees make their way to safe places in the hopes of being protected and are turned away because they're seen as nothing, as dogs, as not good enough, as taking away our resources, as one of our own politicians. But I'm disappointed that once again and again and again and again and again, we find ourselves in the morass of genocide. I know we can come out of it. Because from Armenia, Jewish faith, Bosnia, Rwanda, First Nations, indigenous peoples around the world, African nations under colonization, we have survived. We have survived. I'm an example of it, you're an example of it, most of you are probably examples of it. Just as a collection of individual people can cause mass harm, we too, as a collective, can cause mass good, can bring about human rights. So the question is this: will we be complicit, silent foot soldiers in yet another genocide? And that's something that I pose to my students. Will you be silent? Will you be complicit? Will you be another one of those good people that didn't really know what was going on, but really selfishly are wolves in sheep's clothing for a demonic leadership hell-bent on destruction? Or, and this is a very black or white issue, I would say, will we rise up as a vanguard to strike them down? There is no middle ground here. It is not the Rohingya Muslims that should live in fear. It's Trudeau, it's Trump, it's the UN, it's the generals, it's the government. We must make them feel fear. We must let them know that this will not stand. So just as we're doing today, we need to continue standing up. We need to call out complicity at the international level and demand nothing less than full justice for people at the last step in the process that is genocide. On us. Leaders use their powers to aggrandize themselves, shame on them. The world pretends to not see, shame on the world. But let shame teach us a valuable lesson. It need not be a permanent state. We can help each other rise above our shame.
As he has been requested to tell him about how he came to Canada from Burma, history. So he says that at the beginning why he left from the Burma is no any such human rights name. So we just read in the book and in the paper. Nowhere we see, and we also listen from the radio what is the main meaning of the human rights. We haven't seen it. So the trip was, so we just briefly say, he came to Bangladesh and told Bangladesh to go to Malaysia. I mean, Malaysia and Burma is almost similar for the illegal immigrant people. They don't consider a Burmese people in Malaysia as a human as well. So anyway, the Canadian government sponsored refugee. He came as a refugee of the government sponsor. And then here he says, here, why the human rights name is still in the world existed. Because of you haven't seen the human rights anywhere. And then these big countries are also powerless to bring any fruitful result for the human rights. Such as an example, he said, the ICC, so-called ICC, and then the other UN and Security Council, anyone cannot bring any separation and any implementation for these Rohingya people, what they are suffering in Burma. And then especially to Canada, he's blaming to Canada because of the Canada gave the honorary citizenship to Aung San Suu Kyi. And she was also won by a Nobel laureate. She is a Nobel laureate. But why they don't reconsider again to give another prize to her as a killer? So he's with his tears. He only would like to say why the Canadian government and Nobel Peace Prize committees chose Aung San Suu Kyi to give her the Nobel Prize and Canadian honorary citizen. Is it only for his question? Is only for to kill more people? And why they still she is not seized back her prize and then her honorary citizen? So is all the world organizations are giving her certificate and giving her the license to kill this kind of the innocent kids?
So the question on my heart is, how does this kind of thing happen? As a, if I may say, a religious professional, I have to look at these questions. And I think as people of faith who are gathered here today, we all have to think about how do people get to the place where they can do these kind of things to other people? And I have to agree with Desmond Tutu, people aren't actually born this way. You learn discrimination, right? It isn't actually natural. People learn discrimination. They learn discrimination through all the apparatuses of society, all the subtle ways that they are taught to think about other people who are different than them. And let's just get to the bottom of this. We might look different, but we're actually not different. And to the extent that we are different, it's actually just interesting. Thank God for diversity. Thank God that we're not all the same. It would be boring. I'm especially glad that everyone isn't sort of like a white middle-class Canadian, because the world would really be boring, I have to say. We need your outrage and thank you. And why don't we clap for Bangladesh for trying to help this situation at least.
Right underneath me, the world has become consumed by fear. So love over fear, that's the goal. That was going to be my big ending, but now to simplify it, it's this, is that we must change ourselves first and foremost before anything else. So as the Reverend was also saying, that so I was doing rallies, I was getting people together, signing petitions, but then I also realized, you know what, I have to be the change that I want to see. So the Reverend also brought up politicians. Now I'm running for Vancouver City Council. Why? Because I also realized that there's only so much I can do outside of this so-called system. That I need to go into that, and I need to have people that are doing different things. We all have to work together. We have to be united. It's not just one person's fault that this is occurring. It's everybody's fault. That's the way I look at it. That we in Vancouver alone, we love to say we're multicultural, but all we really do is tolerate each other here. That's the truth. It's a big truth that most of the time we don't like to see. So again, what's happening with the Rohingya, we can send letters, which we should. We should be sending money, sending aid, we should do this. But what can I do now outside this rally? But as Kay was saying, start with yourself, start with love, love over fear, that's the key. So if we can start doing that now, because we realize this homelessness issue that's in Vancouver, it's not, again, a Muslim problem or an atheist problem or ethnic problem. It's a human problem first and foremost. So we had Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Jews coming together, and we opened the mosque as a shelter. Why I'm bringing it up is because then people realize, whoa, we can come together. If we can do that here and be that example, I think the world will become a much better place.
We
stand united with this incredibly resilient people. This crisis started long before last August, and we as the community, as the international community, are responsible to ensure that the voices of the Rohingya are heard. We'd like to say that we hear you, we see you, we stand with you, and we will work so that the recognition, protection, and safety of the Rohingya is on the forefront of the international agenda. Thank you all for being here again.
We know the steps. They're all documented. They repeat again and again. It's not a mystery. It's not rocket science. So why is it that we need to wait till the atrocity has happened, till it becomes an issue, till we intervene? Why not in the very first stages, for example, identifying people, identity cards, for example. That happened in Rwanda. The Hutus and the Tutsis, who never knew they were Hutus or Tutsis before, they were given identity cards. You're a Hutu, you're a Tutsi. That was a warning sign. A similar thing happened with the Rohingya. They were deemed sometime back, I don't know the exact year, as not citizens of Myanmar. It's actually happening right now in a state in India. There's Bangladeshi refugees that have been there since 71, and same thing. They've just recently been deemed not citizens of India, of that state. And so these are steps going towards this massacre that we know is going to happen unless we intervene. So as part of Canadian Peace Initiative, what we're working on is to create and establish a department within our government, the Canadian government, a department like the Department of Defense, Department of Environment, etc. They all have different portfolios, but we don't have any fully budgeted, proper functioning department that focuses on peace building. So there's a huge gap there, and that's what we're working on. And not just for genocides, but also for warfare. Same thing, we know the steps. Iraq, Iran, it's coming up, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, the list goes on and on. We know the steps. Countries are demonized, their leaders are demonized, and eventually some rationale is given, normally not something that's truthful, and you have an attack. So let's work on creating this infrastructure within Canada where we can show the world how we can intervene at a very early stage, at a stage before the violence has started. Right when we get the signs that things are going bad in a certain area, we intervene and prevent the war or the genocide from happening. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in this, please contact me after. And I want to also announce a small success that we have had. I've been involved with the Canadian Peace Initiative for about 6 years now, and it's been a struggle, but we had a small success. There's a MP in Etobicoke Centre riding in Toronto, Boris Reznuski, and he's been interested in forming this department. So he's been working with us since he got elected behind the scenes. And what he has come up with discussions with the Prime Minister's office, with discussions with Global Affairs, he's come up with a motion that was submitted in February for the creation of an ambassador's office within Global Affairs. It's called an Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security. So this is not exactly what we want, but it's a step in that direction. It has many of the functions that we're envisioning in a full department, and we hope to support this motion as he goes around the country doing roundtables.
By bearing witness to the grave human sufferings of millions of Yemenis as a result of the war for the past 3 years. Let me share with you a glimpse of the war in Yemen. War in Yemen has not happened suddenly. It's a result of accumulated mistakes by different parties. If you put your lens closer to Yemen, you would easily catch the terrifying absence of state institutions. In areas controlled by the authority of an armed group, Houthis, supported by Iran, and in areas controlled by the authority of the President Hadi, supported by the government of Saudi Arabia.
Both parties, they have shared the responsibility of killing thousands of civilians, mostly women and children. Responsible for child recruitment, denial of humanitarian access, in addition to detention, enforced disappearance, violations against freedom of speech. Disappearance of a free press, harassing minorities, and other grave violations against human rights. I think there are real opportunities to end this war and realize a fair settlement that puts Yemenis on track to build a safe ground in the rule of law. I call for the comprehensive inclusion of all Yemenis parties in the peace talks to give serious space for the participation of civil society, women, and youth. I call on international organizations to do the following: establish an international commission of inquiry to investigate violations by all parties to the conflict. Stop the sale of weapons to parties involved in violation of human rights in Yemen. Demand an end to the targeting of civilians, residential compounds, public market, cultural and heritage sites, schools and hospitals through air and ground attacks. Ensure the release of all civilians who disappeared forcibly under the authority of the Houthis and under the government of President Hadi. Demand unhindered and no blockade of humanitarian access to all areas of all people in need, and for the same purpose. Because we empathize with their struggles, because we want to instigate change, because we want to make a difference. Today I am here on behalf of NISA Helpline, a helpline for women providing counseling. And at NISA Helpline, we do not tolerate violence. We do not tolerate child abuse. We do not tolerate violence against women. And we do not tolerate genocide. This crisis is not new. The Rohingya have systematically been denied their rights since 1962, and over 60% of those people are women facing violence. 80,000 Rohingya women are now estimated to deliver babies resulting from gang rape by Burmese soldiers. 70,000 children have been orphaned. This is not okay. We cannot tolerate this anymore. We cannot stand by silently and watch as these atrocities continue to occur. We must turn our empathy into action. As an individual, the thought of tackling such large humanitarian crisis can seem daunting, at the very least. We think, what could I possibly do to make a difference? It is easy to be intimidated by the scope and the size of this crisis. Mother Teresa once said, if you cannot feed 100 people, then feed one person. So let's not take ourselves to be overwhelmed by how many people require help. Let's focus on our empathy and turn that empathy into action. So let's turn our empathy into action by writing a letter to the MP in your riding. Don't be afraid to ask them to do more. They are being denied their humanity. Ask your MP to implore the government to do more. Sign a petition. Donate to organizations committed to alleviating the Rohingya crisis. Raise awareness. It is the duty of each and every one of us to join our hands and to bring support to our brothers, our sisters, our children in Rohingya. Do whatever is in our capacity, in your capacity, and never ever doubt the power of your actions. You could be the spark that lights the fire of change. So let's turn our empathy to action. And let's take the smallest step that we can to start making big changes. And together we can. Thank you.
Right now to so many Rohingya women and girls. And displacement, armed conflict, and refugee status are three of the key things that drive people into prostitution. Globally and worldwide, and locally, sorry. Being the people which disproportionately affects women and girls, as such violence always does, because they're more vulnerable. And so I join with you to call on the international community to stand up for justice, to stand up for the basic human rights of the Rohingya people. Thank you so much.
To kind of heart trembles in fear. We traveled through sea, walked miles and miles in the scary jungles, one after the other. I'm barefoot. My clothes are ripped, my body's wet from the rain pouring down minutes after minute. In my arms, my baby brother. And I, a girl, 6 years old to be exact, my legs are tired. I long for my mom's hug, the assuring voice of my father. But what's in front of me is only darkness and emptiness. I have no friends, only strangers surrounding me. I am a child, fleeing violence, killing of innocent lives make little sense to me. But it's real. I keep walking. The river is too vast and deep, but for me and my brother to survive, I have to swim. This is real. This is not a drill. My heart is ripped open. When those men in uniform, who were supposed to protect us, start raiding our houses, taking our fathers and beating them down, they took our mothers, our sisters, and raped them one by one, ripping apart their souls over and over, leaving them to bleed and die, some cutting their throats with knives, leaving their bodies behind, setting the corpse on fire, burning their babies alive. This is not a drill. My eyes are flooded with tears. The fear I face is overwhelming. It's hard to breathe. I have gun pointed in my head. The soldiers held on to the trigger, ready to fire. My hands keep digging the dry, unforgiving earth beneath me. They plan to bury me alive. I looked up at the sky, hoping someone, anyone, will come to my rescue. This is not a drill. My body's aching. My child is hungry. We fled the massacre. We walked on foot. We left everything. It all burned down anyway. I was only able to take my baby, the one person I have left. I sit in a tent in a makeshift camp that is the center of all this dismay. My life, my child's, the future seems so far away. Some men keep soliciting, asking me to work for them. They think I was born yesterday. They think I don't know how atrocious life could be. But I'd rather starve than exchange my body with a few pennies. This is not a drill. Unfortunately, I have something else to say as well. House. They take your IDs. They take everything that identify who you are. They take everything that makes you you, that makes you entitled to all the services. We don't normally realize how much entitlement we have, how many rights we have with that, small, tiny piece of card. Imagine you lose your rights to own your own homes, the one that you worked so hard for, the one that was passed down to you for generations. You lose your lands. And because the lands are, one of the things that Rohingya rely on to
who actually give them lives, because they fish and farm mostly. They're not allowed to do anything else. Imagine your lands are stolen from you by the government and redistributed to other people who might have been your neighbor.
Because of the limitations they had. So now, I can see you all have great minds, powerful minds, and this can be nucleus for Canada, from this most multicultural city on earth. And I strongly feel that you can perhaps create people-to-people citizenships awareness program, and that can help reduce violence against humankind. The government will not do much, but we can pressurize, we can ask our MPs, because there is election coming. We can go to our MP with a list of requests. Like we can also go to Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister. We can even write to Donald Trump. We can write to all the leaderships that we citizens do not want 500 years down the road our children will be victimized based on their race and color and orientation or their attitude or interest. So please forget about United Nations. Forget about, I'm talking not you to forget about United Nations, but the leaderships to forget about United Nations.
Yes, please.
You can give the card if anybody wants.
Now! What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Okay, and then the other one is no peace, no justice. So it will go on and on and on. And then we can think about something else that's regarding Rohingya. And when do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Let's go with Save Rohingya now. Okay? Save Rohingya now! 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 So good meeting you. Stop genocide now! Stop genocide now! Stop genocide now! Stop genocide now! Stop genocide. Stop Rohingya genocide! 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 Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it?
Ready?